In at number 10, Battery Ditto. This creepypasta was written by an unknown author on the Creepypasta wiki page. It's a story about how Team Rocket was experimenting on Dittos, using several of them to try to create a new Pokemon. They would keep them in cramped cages wired with electricity, and if they ever made a peep, they would be shocked almost to death. One night a security guard was falling asleep, so he released his Arcanine to watch over them. When he woke up from a loud scream, he discovered that a Ditto had bred with the Arcanine. After several weeks of the Ditto not changing back to its original shape, the dark looking Arcanine gave birth to an egg. When the egg finally hatched, it was a Pokemon that they then called Houndour. With this new discovery of birthing Pokemon, Team Rocket rapidly began trying to replicate the process, torturing the Dittos as they went through it. And while some results were successful, most led to the death of many Pokemon. Word traveled fast, and soon the lab was destroyed, releasing all of the trapped Dittos and the newly created Pokemon. However, this did not stop Team Rocket. They continued torturing any Ditto that they could find, and still, to this day, are attempting to manipulate them. There is no end to the mutations that they can force on those poor Battery Dittos. And at number 9, Mewtwo. This creepypasta story is based on an original tale found on tumblr.com. It's about a gamer who picks up a copy of Pokemon Blue, and when he begins playing, a Mewtwo starts stalking him. Every time he entered into the grass, he would be thrown into a battle with a level 70 Mewtwo. And at the time, all of his Pokemon had very low levels, so sure enough, the Mewtwo made quick work of his party. However, the strange thing was that when Mewtwo defeated one of his Pokemon, they were completely wiped from his party. He continued to reset his device, but nothing worked. They were all still gone. Oddly, upon restarting, the Mew glitch occurred when the gamer managed to make it to Lavender Town without running into the Mewtwo. This glitch would keep Mew in your party no matter what. And when he inevitably ran into the Mewtwo again, his party was wiped out, leaving only the Mew to face him. When both were down to just a sliver of health, the Mew used Explosion, causing both Pokemon to faint and the screen to go black. Upon restarting, the Mewtwo was there, and with a text that read, "What have I become?" It then used Struggle on itself, resulting in a Pokeball containing Sacred Ash to remain in its place. The gamer used this to revive his once defeated party, and would come to the revelation that maybe Mewtwo isn't just a monster, but a Pokemon with a compassionate heart after all. In at number 8, Mount Silver. This is a creepy yet somehow touching story about the ghost of your rival in the first Pokemon games. It's known that years before you meet Professor Oak, he trained your rival Red to reach Mount Silver. What's unknown is that once Red was there, he was never heard from again, and upon failed attempts at contacting him, Professor Oak travels to Mount Silver to discover that Red has died. What he sees though is the spirit of Red, and his ghost simply utters, "Help me." Oak knew that he needed to find a trainer worthy enough to make it to Mount Silver in order to free the spirit of Red. The Elite Four are positioned strategically as your last test to prove your worthiness as a trainer. When you finally meet Red at Mount Silver, he's surprised to see you, and with no words exchanged, a battle of epic proportions ensues. When you have won the battle, Red says nothing, and before disappearing from your view, he has a faint smile, almost to say, "Thank you." Number 7, Here Lies Giovanni. This creepypasta is based on a story called Colorblind found on the Creepypasta wiki page. It's a tale of a gamer who falls deep into a hack copy of Pokemon Yellow. In the game, the main character is named Dane, and he has a Pikachu named Laddie. The gamer finds out that this storyline is much different than he's ever played. It follows Dane, Laddie, and another traveler named Delia, who travels with them throughout the game. And after becoming somewhat famous for his successes in battles, he's asked to become the gym leader for Viridian City. He then hears a snap and his game shuts off. But when he restarts it, a text box appears that says 1 year later. His sprite is different. He's now the gym leader, but his Pikachu is missing. The gamer soon comes to realize that Laddie had passed away in the year that Dane was the gym leader. He has one last interaction with his old friend Delia, who doesn't want anything to do with him after his neglect led to the loss of Laddie. He gives her his mother's old house in Pallet Town and decides that it's best if they just part ways. Then, once again, the game clicks and shuts off. And when the gamer restarts, Dane's sprite is now wearing a striped suit and has much more defined, mature features. The game takes over in cinematic fashion and brings Dane to the Pokemon Tower. He says one last goodbye to Laddie, and a text box appears that says, "I will never find another you, but a Pikachu I will find. I will form an organization to purge Kanto for me. I came as Dane, but I will leave as another." The sprite walks along the tombstones, stopping at one, where a text box appears that says, "I must find a name appropriate to depart with. The tombstone just reads, "Here lies Giovanni." Number 6, Nightmare's Revenge. In this creepypasta story from the wiki page, a gamer has an evil encounter with a rogue Gengar. He first comes across the Pokemon in the wild, and when he catches it, he names it Nightmare. And after regular life events took over, the gamer never really had time to play his Pokemon Soul Silver. And when he finally picked it back up, the Gengar was no longer in his party. And in front of him was his rival curled up in a pool of blood, barely alive. With his last words he said, "Ethan, a Gengar attacked me." He said something about finding a guy named Red. "Here, take this." What he gave him was a crucifix of some kind. And after tracking down the Gengar, he battled with him, except the Gengar somehow knew the gamer's real name. He said, "Tell me, Ben, do you still care about me?" Ben answered by just hitting the yes option, but Nightmare didn't care. He wiped out Ben's Pokemon, and with only his sprite left on the screen, Ben remembered the crucifix. He used that, and then the Gengar sprite appeared shocked as it sunk into the ground, leaving a text box that said, "Nightmare has died." And as the credits rolled and Ben in complete shock, he was about to shut off his Game Boy when Nightmare's red eyes filled the screen and a demonic voice said,
"I wouldn't celebrate so soon, Ben. For as long as you live, I will haunt you."
Number 5, Divulging into Madness. This next creepypasta story is about the brainwashing that Pokemon had on the brain of a young girl. Her parents bought her a Pokemon game to fit in with her new friends at school, but what they didn't see coming was how isolated it actually made her. She was obsessed with it, and only took her eyes off the screen while sleeping. And one night the parents snuck into her room to see what was so appealing about the game. They discovered that she had only been playing for 13 hours, but that didn't make any sense because since buying her the game months ago, she never put it down. And when the little girl wakes up, she starts her Pokemon game, but from this perspective, we see that the game has been talking to her. And the character Red told the little girl about her parents sneaking into the room to play the game, and that they needed to be taken care of. Obsessed with the game, she obeyed. And when her parents greeted her in the kitchen, she grabbed the knife from the drawer, and as the game instructed her, "Good girl, now finish him." She quickly slits her father's throat, and with her mother in disbelief, she desperately tries to convince her daughter to drop the knife and the Game Boy in her other hand.
Red then says, "Now darling, don't listen. She wants to take me again, and who knows what she'll do."
With her mother now trying to run away, the girl throws the knife, hitting her mother in the back. Red then says, "Your suffering ends now. Now we can be friends forever." In at number 4, Tick, Tick, Tick. This creepypasta story is about why beating Pokemon may not be such a good idea. Our protagonist plays his way through the game, and after every gym leader he defeats, they all say the same thing. Tick, tick, tick. He is waiting. Every single time they say that. Before he is about to face Red at Mount Silver, his sprite says, "For the sake of you and me, the ticking needs to continue." He ignored the message and decided to find out exactly why the trainers were warning him of Red. And when he defeats Red, a text box appears saying, "Tick, tick, boom." And just as the gamer is reading the word boom, his Game Boy sends a jolt of electricity, shocking him so much that he drops the game. And when he picks it up, the save file is corrupted. That's when he pieces together his character's last message. When you defeat Red, there is nothing. The ticking was leading him to that. As long as Red was undefeated, everyone in the game would still exist. Beat the game, and you destroy their world. Hence his character saying, "For the sake of you and me, the ticking needs to continue." Oddly, he can still hear the subtle ticking noise wherever he goes. Even with a digital clock, he hears tick, tick, tick. Number 3, Ghost Marowak. This story is based on a creepypasta from the wiki page and, like most others, has an unknown author. I wish I could give credit, but it's not there. But it's about a gamer who managed to catch a ghost Marowak by using a hack of infinite Master Balls. Amazingly, Marowak stayed in his party but was simply classified as a regular Marowak. However, the consequences were worse than he thought. With the ghost Marowak now in his party, the gamer lost everything. All of his previously caught Pokemon, every TM, every HM, everything. Anytime that he would enter into the grass, he would always come into battle with a Cubo. Every time. He restarted the game with hopes of it fixing his mistake of choosing to cheat the game. But when he started, his sprite was now replaced by the ghost Marowak. And every time he hits any button, the poor Marowak lets out a cry that will haunt him forever. And at number 2, Poor Rival. This creepypasta is more of a history lesson on your rival, but it still remains something to consider when playing the game that may creep you out. When you meet your rival in Lavender Town, he's actually there to lay his fallen Raticate to rest. The one Pokemon that you actually defeated in your last meeting. Instead of blaming you for his loss, your rival channels his hatred for you into becoming the Indigo League champion. However, before he can do that, you beat him once again. And at the end, your poor rival is scolded by his grandfather while you receive the professor's praise. Throughout the game, you manage to crush your rival's innocence, crush his dreams, and steal away the love from his own grandfather. The author then ends the story by saying, maybe he's a ghost that can't leave, or just an orphan who lost his Raticate in a freak accident and can't stop thinking about it, and never leaving until death itself can rid of it. But that's how it goes. Or maybe it's just all in your head. Lastly, in our number 1 spot, Everything Dies. This creepypasta is based on a story by an author known as Flaky Porcupine. Great name. It's told from the perspective of a young Paris Pokemon, who at a young age lost its father. The Pokemon's mother would tell the young Paris that everything dies, sweetie, it's what we were born to do. Confused by this, it tries to lead a normal life in the woods, wrestling with other Pokemon, but with each day it can feel the parasites on its back growing and taking control of its body. And when it finally is captured by a trainer, to which it refers to as a two-legger, it continually hears the mentioning of the number 24. What that Paris doesn't know is that the trainers are talking about the level in which Paris evolves. And when it's experiencing its evolution, the trainer says it's okay, everything dies, which finally makes it understand what its mother was talking about. The author then describes the transformation by saying, my body suddenly glows in an intense white that would blind one's eyes before I too become just like my brethren around me. It felt great pain, that of 1,000 knives piercing its body. The last thing it hears is congratulations, your Paris evolved into a Parasect. Number 9, Buried Alive. There are a ton of hacked Pokemon games out there, but this one was actually an intended original script for the game known as the Berryman script. It was initially meant to be a boss, but I believe it was just too freaky for players, especially considering their demographic. And in a battle view mode, the Buried Alive character looks like a decaying human corpse. And if you happen to lose the battle, the Berryman will say, finally, fresh meat. Then, he would drag your player into the ground. Following that, the typical game over screen would appear, but in the background, you can see the Buried Alive character devouring your player. Then suddenly, this creepy soundtrack and animation called Static Mesh would appear. Followed by this disturbing message. What is that even supposed to mean? Like, it's also believed that it may have a similar effect to the Lavender Tone that I mentioned before. Number 8, Pokemon Lost Silver. After buying a used Pokemon Silver game, this player was weirded out to find the game they continued into from the previous player had 999 hours put into the game, all 16 badges and 99,999 Pokedollars and all 251 Pokemon in the Pokedex. The only Pokemon in the player's arsenal were unknowns that spelled out the word leave, and a Cyndaquil named Hurry. After landing in a dark cave, the player used Cyndaquil's flash to see and soon regretted what they saw. The walls were covered in blood red. The player landed in a new dark room and then again tried to use the flash, but then it just said Hurry has fainted. And the unknowns now spelt out the word he died. Now his character was white with bloody tears coming from his eyes. Plus his badge count kept changing. First to 24, then to 32. The unknowns now spelled dying. After engaging in a battle with a Pikachu, his Pokemon didn't say fainted, it said it had died. Then the Pikachu also died. The character even comes across the Pokemon Gold sprite that says goodbye forever. He then appears in a small room filled with graves, and all the gym leaders at the bottom were replaced with skulls. The unknowns then spelled I'm dead. A final text came up on the screen that read RIP, and the player could not escape, no matter what they pressed. It seemed as though this hacked copy was telling a story of a young trainer who, despite his efforts in becoming a Pokemon master, still couldn't avoid death and being forgotten by the next generation. Number 7. Trapped in a cave. This creepypasta is more sad and disturbing than just scary, but still, it's a good one. It's a tale of a player who comes across a horrible sight in a cave. The only light seemed to be coming from the tail of a Charizard named Ruby. Ruby was with her trainer, but something was wrong. The trainer was missing his arm and both legs. Ruby appeared to be sad and afraid. The trainer repeatedly kept asking the Charizard if it was hungry, but Ruby denied, but its rumbling stomach told another story. The man insisted, eventually placed his arm in between Ruby's fangs. Eventually, the Charizard closed its eyes and bit off his arm, leaving only a head and torso. Eventually, the trainer falls asleep and the Charizard keeps crying and crying, as if it knew what was going to happen next when it got hungry. Number 6. Abandoned Loneliness. This creepypasta revolves around a hack copy of Leaf Green, given to a friend and begins with an EV called Loneliness, except the E in Loneliness is missing for some reason. And at the beginning, the player's name is Leaf and follows a number of very strange events and signs that take place in an area called Emptiness, not Pallet Town. After exploring, the player notices that this town is filled with these NPCs that appear to look like ghosts with blood coming from their eyes. The ghost constantly gives strange and evil advice to the character as they progress through the game. As fog covers most of the landscape, the player notices the tiles on the ground spelling out cryptic messages. One of the ghosts even says, "Can't you do better?" The signs and ghosts continue to warn of a friend who betrayed loneliness. Leaf even sees the game's rival Blue pleading to not believe the ghosts and to run before they get you. The player finds out that Blue abandoned loneliness, and after several creepy messages, including one from Brock who said the ghost tricked him, the player shuts off his game. Months later, he picks it back up again, but everything is different. His character is called Sora, and his Eevee is a different Pokemon named Unwanted. He eventually enters into a battle with a wild Eevee named Loneliness, and when he defeats it, the player turns into one of those ghosts and is now said to be cursed as well. Suddenly, he's in Pallet Town again, where Red and Blue say that Leaf got the brunt of the curse. He interacts with a signpost nearby and it just says, "Loneliness was put to rest, RIP." Number 5. Disabled. So far, a lot of these creepy things coming from the Pokemon series have a lot to do with strange sounds or frequencies, and this one's no different. Our player in this story was absolutely in love with two characters, Jigglypuff and Wigglytuff. When she buys Pokemon Soul Silver, she immediately sets out to capture a Jigglypuff. This takes some time though, but eventually she manages to catch one in the Safari Zone. No matter how high she leveled her new Jigglypuff, she always kept her sing attack because, well, she loved to hum along to the tune. Still set on getting her second favorite Wigglytuff, but understanding how difficult it was to even find Jigglypuff, she decides to put a high level Pokemon on the wireless trade board in hopes of someone trading a Wigglytuff. And well, she gets her wish, and someone trades her, but oddly the Pokemon is called Disabled in all caps. It has one move, Sing. Before entering into a battle with her new Pokemon, she loads up a couple TMs like Hidden Power, Swagger, and Explosion. She enters into a battle with her new Wigglytuff, but for some reason, Sing is disabled. She tries using Hidden Power for Wig, but it fails. She tries to run, but it fails. The words "wants to fight" comes up on the screen. Then, it gets weirder. Wigglytuff begins doing its own actions. Repeatedly, she sees "disabled" try to use Sing. Sing was disabled. Again and again and again this happens. The enemy suddenly appears sick, as if poisoned, and then flees from battle. But Wig doesn't stop. The text box fills the screen. Disabled use struggle. It struggled. Then more, saying, "Why can't I sing? Sing. Sing." The word "sing" now is flooding the screen. Then randomly an option appears saying, "Can you sing? Yes or no?" The player hits no several times, and suddenly the speakers let out a large, loud screeching noise, causing the player to drop her DS. Having enough of this weirdness, she tries trading the Wigglytuff, and when a trade appears, she hits yes several times, begging for it to hurry. When the trade goes through, it was for a Cyndaquil. Its name was Hurry. Number 4. Strangled Red. This creepy hacked game of Pokemon Red was found in a trash bin of all places, and it tells the story of a trainer named Steven and his best friend, a Charizard named Miki. Oddly, when the player starts up the screen, it just reads Pokemon Strangled Red version. Realizing it was a hacked game, he plays anyways. Although it won't let him continue with the previous player's game, so he hits new game. The player's name was automatically set to Steven. He starts with a single Charmander named Miki, and everything about this game was just a bit different. His character had a smirk and long hair, his rival was actually his brother, and the starter bedroom had 2 of everything. The game played normally, just the storyline was different. Using the Charmander, it quickly evolved into a Charizard by level 25. As soon as the player reached Lavender Town, things started to get weird. He entered into a battle with his brother Blue, and once they were successful, they had a dialogue back and forth at the house that was strange for a solo game. The NPC wanted Steven to trade him his Charizard Miki. After the no button wouldn't work, he reluctantly hit yes. That's when the game froze mid-trade. He turned it off, and when he restarted, the only option was continue, except he didn't have the Charizard and was greeted with a text box that read 1 year later. When he checked his menu, the character was different. Its eyes were blank, the smirk was gone, and his long hair looked messy. Also, Miki was dead. The player pieced together that this character named Steven is actually the previous champion that then becomes your rival in other games. The town seemed to mourn his loss, with almost presenting him with compassion for this disturbed character. And at this point the game takes over, so the player takes Steven to Lavender Town, where all of the NPC trainers seem to ignore him completely, all saying, just go. Sometimes dead is best. To read the full story though, and ending as well, look up Pokemon Strangled Red. It's far too gruesome for me to continue from there. Number 3. Braid. This is a creepypasta that is great if you're looking for a good Halloween story to read. It occurs around Ilex Forest and is told in 3 separate narratives that come together to create an unsettling atmosphere. Standing between the player and Goldenrod City, they know they have to enter the forest. An old tale about the history of Ilex Forest involves villagers bringing baskets of food to the edge of the forest, and we learn that it is left there for a witch in exchange of fruitful harvests each year. However, we learn that if they look at the witch while she is using her magic, the blessing will become a curse. This tremendous creepypasta also goes into detail about the leader of the nearby town's daughter and her curiosity leading her to a curse from the witch, trapping her in the forest and thus becoming the voice of the forest. That's why when you enter Ilex Forest, you're warned, and even the trees seem to be weeping and moaning, just watching as the witch turns each new helpless child into a gift to the voice of the forest. Number 2. Best Friends Forever. As much as I enjoy the hacked games and the dramatic stories that people tell using Pokemon locations, this one is especially freaky. It's a tale of a girl and her best friend. That friend was a Torchic named Blue. The player would always play with her real life friend Talia, but when Talia said that she didn't want to be friends with her anymore, the player just transfers that companionship to her Pokemon characters. Playing night and day, one day Talia snatched her Game Boy out of her hand and threw it to the ground, and was about to crush it with her foot before the game just lets out a loud screeching noise. Talia turns pale and runs away, and her friend Blue's stats also change as well, from likes to sleep to angry. And after moving on to new Pokemon games, the player said goodbye to her old friends and started anew with a Mudkip named Red. As she continued to buy new games, she would bring over her best players from previous versions until she remembered she forgot about her old friend Blue. When starting up her old Pokemon Ruby game, a strange message came on the screen that just said, "You promised you wouldn't replace me." This is where it gets weird. Then she begins having a conversation with Blue, where the Pokemon is responding on the screen to everything she says. Then Blue asks if Talia is still mean to her, even saying that it got very angry. The player decides to carry Blue over to the new game, but first, she's asked by her mother to pick up a pie pan that she lent to Talia's mother. The girl runs over to Talia's home, but there's no answer. And when she hears a scream, she runs into the house to find Talia She finds Talia's little brother hiding, who tells her that they were just watching TV when a loud beeping noise went off, and Talia was just dead. She rushes home, and on her DS is a text from Blue saying, "She was mean to you. She deserved it." She wakes up around 3 AM to a beeping noise similar to the one Talia's brother heard, and it's Blue. All of her Pokemon begin disappearing, and a text appears, "Now we can be best friends forever." Suddenly she wakes up in her bedroom, but she doesn't recognize anything. She runs downstairs to see a lady she doesn't know, and the woman turns and says, "Good morning, honey. You're finally awake. Our neighbor Professor Birch is anxious to meet you." Number 1. Pokemon Black. This is an infamous hacked version of Pokemon. It begins normally, except with a 4th option for a Pokemon being Ghost. If the player selects Ghost, it starts at a level 1, and is only capable of 1 move. move, Curse. When the player uses Curse in battle, the screen cuts to black and only cries of their enemy can be heard. Then, when they return, the Pokemon is gone. When they fought against a trainer, the same thing would happen, except each defeat meant a loss of their Pokeball. And once they were gone, the player could actually use Curse on the trainer. This would replace the character with a tombstone. And after defeating the Elite Four, the game changes again, and a text appears many years later. At this point, where all of these stories begin to get creepy, the player ends up in Lavender Town. Except this time, as an elderly man, standing in front of tombstones. In this post-game world, it's just void of any NPCs, with only tombstones where they used to be. When returning to where they started the game, the player learns that every living thing was dead because the player and Ghost had cursed them. Finally, the Ghost character appears, but this time, it's against your player. The old man character only has one move, and it's Struggle. Until almost having no health, the Ghost uses Curse for one last time, attacking the player. The screen then fades to black, and upon rebooting it, the game file was erased. The protagonist in this story describes himself as a simple college student living alone in an apartment. He was so excited about the release of Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver that he locked himself out of all media and, well, internet for that matter. Well, except for school purposes, of course. Unfortunately, school took precedence, and because he was a broke college kid at the time, he couldn't afford to get either game upon launch. Still wanting to play Pokemon on his Game Boy Color, he traveled to his local GameStop and picked up a used copy of Pokemon Silver. Upon starting his trip down memory lane, the gamer notices something bizarre. The Game Freak logo started up normally, but then it froze. No matter what he tried, he couldn't fix this glitch in the old cartridge. Upon restarting it several times, the logo finally vanished, but it faded to a black screen. Instead of the usual menu that would appear, it started in what appeared to be a previous save file. This was where things really began to get strange. The previous owner's name was just 3 dots, and their profile had 999 hours put into the game. They had all 16 badges, 99,999 Pokédollars, and all 251 Pokemon in the Pokedex. Assuming the mysterious owner had an amazing team, the protagonist was shocked to find that it was just 5 unknowns, with the 6th Pokemon named Hurry in all caps. Having a basic knowledge that the unknowns represent letters, he looked into it to find that his team spelled out the word leave. There was a strange silence as well amongst the Pokemon. None of them cried out like they normally do. And after putting away this startling find, our protagonist realized that he was in a room inside of the Bellsprout Tower. He searched for a way out and ended up stumbling upon a ladder behind the main pillar that led him into a dark room. A chill went up his spine as the theme music from the ruins of Where You Find the Unknown started playing. He remembered that the Pokemon named Hurry was a Cyndaquil, so thinking quickly, he used Flash to light up the room. He would regret this almost instantly. The room was covered in blood red with a thin gray path heading south to a signpost. When he reached the sign read turn back now, yes or no. He hit yes, and luckily it allowed him to leave the room and end that creepy tune. Suddenly his Cyndaquil fainted and his team was replaced with unknowns that spelt out the words he died. Things began getting more and more bizarre here. His badge count was now at 24 for some reason, and his sprite's arms were missing. The rope animation played and his sprite sank into the ground. Now his sprite's character was completely white. His legs were missing. Bloody tears were flowing from his eyes, and his badge count was now at 32. Now having an intuition that this game was either hacked or cursed, he checked the team to find 5 unknowns spelling out the word dying, and a Celebi with 1 leg, 1 arm, 1 eye, and 1 attack. Perish Song. After wandering around for a bit and finding some NPCs that refused to speak with him, a battle randomly ensued. It was Red. His Celebi then jumped into battle with Red's seemingly normal Pikachu, except it was level 255 and its sprite seemed upset. When the battle started, fight was the only option, and because Pikachu was the higher level, he went first. The Pikachu used Cursed, Celebi used Perish Song, and just like that, both Pokemon were KO'd. Except instead of fainted, he saw a text box appear that read, Celebi has died. Then the Pikachu oddly used a move called Destiny Bond, but the same text appeared saying, Pikachu has died. To his shock, his opponent Red was beheaded after all of that. Now he had 40 badges and a team of unknowns that spelt out, no more. After all of this, he was back in Newbark Town, hopefully to get some answers. His sprite was nothing but a floating head now with a transparent body, but he looked like a ghost that you would see in the games Diamond and Pearl. When he left the house, he didn't enter outside, he entered into this dark void. Finally, he encountered something. It was Gold. It was Gold's regular sprite, and when the protagonist tried to speak with him, he just got a text box that read, Goodbye forever. Following that, another escape rope animation occurred, and when he was back in that original room that he believed was to be in the Bellsprout Tower, there was graves now surrounding him, and his sprite had completely vanished. His badge count was now at 0. All of the photos of gym leaders were replaced with skulls, and his Pokemon team spelled out the words, "I'm dead." A final text box appeared that read RIP. That's when he realized the point of this twisted and sadistic Pokemon journey. Gold presumably had been dead for years after he defeated Red. The author writes, "He was a young trainer who, despite his efforts in collecting so many badges and attempts at becoming a Pokemon master, was still unable to avoid the inevitable fate of death, and his efforts were eventually forgotten by the next generation." Coming in at number 9, Here Lies Giovanni. This creepypasta is based on a story called Colorblind found on the Creepypasta wiki page. It's a tale of a gamer who falls deep into a hacked copy of Pokemon Yellow. In the game, the main character is a trainer named Dane with a Pikachu named Laddie. The gamer finds out that this storyline is much different than any that he's ever played before. It follows Dane, Laddie, and another trainer named Delia, who travels with them throughout the game. After becoming somewhat famous for his success in battles, he's asked to become the gym leader for Viridian City. He then hears a snap and his game shuts off. When he restarts, a text box appears reading 1 year later. His sprite is a little bit different this time. He's now the gym leader, but his Pikachu is missing. The gamer soon comes to realize that Laddie had passed away in the year that Dane was the gym leader. He has one last interaction with his old friend Delia, who doesn't want anything to do with him after his neglect led to the loss of Laddie. He gives her his mother's old home in Pallet Town and decides that it's best if they part ways. Then, once again, the game snaps and shuts off. When the gamer restarts, Dane's sprite is now wearing a striped suit and has much more defined, mature features. The game takes over in cinematic fashion and brings Dane to the Pokemon Tower. He says one last goodbye to Laddie, and a text box appears that says, "I will never find another you, but a Pikachu I will find. I will form an organization to purge Kanto until it is found. I came as Dane, but I will leave as another." The sprite then walks along the tombstone, stopping at one for a moment, and a text box appears that reads, "I must find a name appropriate to depart with." The tombstone then reads, "Here lies Giovanni." In at number 8, You Will Join Us. This creepypasta is about a gamer who loved playing Pokemon Gold and worked so hard to build his team up. When his battery drained though, he ended up losing all of his saves. As a result, he moved on to newer versions of Pokemon, but when Pokemon Heart Gold was released, he was excited to replay a familiar region. When he starts the game, Professor Elm greets him by his name except says, "Welcome back." This was odd, but he continued. He would then say, "They're waiting for you." And at this point he loses control of his character and is teleported to Lavender Town, where he sees 6 gravestones all in a row, all of which had his Pokemon Gold teammates' names on them. They rose from the graves except in a more pixelated Game Boy Color version, each one confronting the trainer that he had left them behind. Then one addressed him by name saying, "We are yours, so if you will not permit us to join you, you will join us." Immediately after this, his sprite began doing the dig animation, causing the screen to go completely dark. In at number 7, It's Just a Game. This creepypasta is about a gamer who comes across strange shape-shifting Pokemon, and at one point she believes she's seeing a Clefairy until it suddenly changes into a Gengar that lets out an evil laugh before disappearing. Then while in the rock tunnel, she's confronted by another Pokemon who at first appears to be an Onix, that then soon changes to jet black with glowing red eyes. Fully believing at this point that she may have purchased a hack copy of the game, she continues on to see what else it offers. The dark turn happens when she's faced against another unknown trainer named Aaron, who shockingly resembles her best friend Aaron in real life. When the battle begins, Aaron first uses a Gengar, and then the all-black Onix, and then her final Pokemon was none other than the Buried Alive character. That's when the Aaron trainer begins to decay like the Buried Alive character itself, and as the screen flashed red, she throws her Game Boy aside to call her friend. Her friend Aaron tries to calm her down, saying that it's just a game, but when she comes back to her Game Boy, the Aaron trainer is facing her with a text box that just reads, "It's just a game, right?" In at number 6, Poor Rival. This creepypasta is more of a history lesson on your rival, but it is still something to consider when playing the game that may start to creep you out. When you meet your rival in Lavender Town, he's actually there to lay his fallen Raticate to rest, the one Pokemon that you actually defeated in your last meeting. Instead of blaming you for its loss, your rival rival channels his hatred for you into becoming the Indigo League champion. However, before he can do that, you beat him once again, and at the end your poor rival is scolded by his grandfather while you receive the professor's praise. Throughout the game, you manage to crush your rival's innocence, crush his dreams, and steal away the love from his own grandfather. The author then ends the story by saying maybe he's a ghost that can't leave, or just an orphan who lost his Raticate in a freak accident, and can't stop thinking about it and can never leave until death itself can rid him of this. But that's how it goes, or maybe it's just all in your head. In at number 5, Mount Silver. This is a creepy yet somehow touching story about the ghost of your rival in the first Pokemon games. It's known that years before you meet Professor Oak, he trained your rival Red to reach Mount Silver. What's unknown is that once Red was there, he was never heard from again, and upon failed attempts at contact, Professor Oak travels to Mount Silver to discover that Red has died. What he sees though is the spirit of Red, and his ghost simply utters, "Help me." Oak knew that he needed to find a trainer worthy enough to make it to Mount Silver in order to free the spirit of Red. The Elite Four are positioned strategically as your last test to prove your worthiness as a trainer. When you finally meet Red at Mount Silver, he's surprised to see you and with no words exchanges in a battle of epic proportions. When you have won the battle, Red says nothing, and before disappearing from your view, he has a faint smile almost to say thank you. In at number 4, Nightmare's Revenge. In this creepypasta story from the wiki page, a gamer has an evil encounter with a rogue Gengar. He first comes across the Pokemon in the wild, and then when he catches it, he renames it to Nightmare. After regular life events took over, the gamer never really had time to play his Pokemon Soul Silver. When he finally picked it back up, the Gengar was no longer in his party, and in front of him was his rival curled up in a pool of blood, barely alive. With his last words he said, "Ethan, a Gengar attacked me." He said something about finding a guy named Red. "Here, take this." What he gave him was a crucifix of some kind, and after he tracked down the Gengar, he battled with him, except the Gengar somehow knew the gamer's real name. He said, "Tell me, Ben, do you still care about me?" Ben answered by hitting the yes option, but Nightmare didn't care. He wiped out Ben's Pokemon, and with only his sprite left, Ben remembered the crucifix. He used that and the Gengar sprite appeared shocked as if it sunk into the ground, leaving a text box that said, "Nightmare has died." And as the credits rolled and Ben in complete shock himself, he was about to shut off the Game Boy when Nightmare's red eyes filled the screen and a demonic voice said, "I wouldn't celebrate so soon, Ben. For as long as you live, I will haunt you." In at number 3, Life Force. This creepy tale is about a sinister Litwick. A trainer and her Pokemon were traveling through a dark cave when they saw a flickering light in the distance. The Litwick approached and agreed to help guide them through the tunnel. What they didn't know was that Litwick would be slowly draining the energy from her Pokemon. When her Dewott finally fainted and died, she desperately tried to reach for a Pokeball to assist her, but Litwick wasn't having any of that. The Pokemon knocked her to the ground as her energy was rapidly fading. A text box then appeared that said, "Death shines like a candle." In at number 2, Whole Again. This creepypasta is about a gamer who was playing Pokemon Black and wished to capture a rare dragon Pokemon that was said to be lurking in the caves. Although along the way he's faced with creepy signs that warn the dragon needs flesh to survive and to become whole again. He keeps seeing this "whole again" phrasing everywhere. He wouldn't come to realize its meaning until he finally battled the mysterious Pokemon. While in a battle, when one of his Pokemon would faint, a piece of them would now be attached to the enemy's sprite, making him whole again. Last but not least, in our number 1 spot, Loss of Purpose. This heartbreaking creepypasta is about the characters in the Pokemon game and what happens when left behind. Our protagonist picks up an old copy of Pokemon Red, but noticed that after every trainer or enemy that he defeated, they would just say, "Now I shall stand forgotten." This creepy message was alluding to the fact that once you move on in the game, they remain in place with no real use. Eventually our gamer comes into an odd battle with himself, and after losing the battle, the enemy says, "Your purpose has been served. End it all before you exist alone forever." When he tried to start a new game, he would only get a message that said, "The dead do not return." It wasn't until then that our protagonist realizes the character's fear of a loss of purpose.
Starting us off in at number 5, Pokemon Cursed Forever. Cursed Forever's creepypasta is as follows. The narrator begins their tale by stating they've always loved Pokemon, specifically the first 3 Game Boy titles, Red, Blue, and Yellow. Hating emulators, they managed to find a copy of Pokemon Yellow and an old Game Boy Color to play it on. After he bought them and returned home, he attempted to play the game. Immediately though, he realized that the title lacked sound. Assuming the cartridge was a little glitchy, he wasn't surprised when the music kicked in at the main title title screen, and that Pikachu, who appears on the title screen, was missing his eyes. When Professor Oak appeared, his head and arms were missing. When our narrator decided to test out the previous game saved on the cartridge, it got even weirder. Pikachu's special emotion window appeared, and the electric Pokemon looked incredibly solemn. Then the game continued in Professor Oak's lab. Pallet Town was not like how our narrator remembered it to be. It was entirely deserted with only himself and the lab remaining. Walking north of the town in the tall grass brought forth more surprises. The grass was populated by Pokemon who should not have been there, like Gengars and Alakazams and Cubones. The only option that appeared when he'd get into a battle was run. Eventually the player got to Viridian City, which was severely glitched. The only building they could enter was the Poke Center, which looked demented on the inside. Nurse Joy was gone, but her Chansey was still there, who let out a deranged cry, and then a battle began between Chansey and the player. The only option available again was to run, but this time they couldn't escape. The Chansey then used an attack called a Cack-Ip. That's Pikachu spelled backwards, which is also, by the way, very difficult to say. Chansey then fainted. All of a sudden another Pokemon, an evil looking Pikachu sprite appeared, and a new battle began. Now, the player's sprite had an HP bar, and the battle ensued. Long story short, a Cack-Ip wins the battle. And when the player returned to Viridian City, everything was even more demented, and text boxes appeared declaring that the player had caught a Cack-Ip. Eventually a screen appears on the player's Game Boy that reads, "Cursed forever," and no matter what he did, what button he pressed, that screen would not go away, except for when he turned the Game Boy off. So, does this sound intriguing to you? Well, it has been adapted into a game that you can download online at GameJolt.com and play. Not an ad for them, they're just the place where you can get it. And finally, at number 1, Hypno's Lullaby. Hypno's Lullaby is one of the more interesting and unique creepypastas on our list. It began as a creepypasta poem in the vein of the Pied Piper, in which the psychic Pokemon Hypno lures children away from their homes using his hypnotism abilities and then feeds on their dreams for all of eternity. Here's a taste of the poem for you. I quote, "Come little children, come with me. Safe and happy you will be. Away from your homes now let us run. With Hypno you'll have so much fun. Oh little children please don't cry. Hypno wouldn't hurt a fly. Be free, be free, be free to play. Come down in my cave with me to stay." It gets darker from there too. The poem began circulating around 2010, and then the same year a YouTuber uploaded an actual song using the poem, which was creepy AF, and scored itself 3 million views. Now you can actually download a fan-made version of the game, which began circulating online around 2013. It's actually a ROM hack of Pokemon Fire Red, and you encounter an evil Hypno who kidnaps, which actually sounds like a really fun thing to deal with. I mean, like, obviously bad for the children, but exciting gameplay for you.